The distress signal cut through the darkness of space like a sharp scream. And Captain Jake Morrison heard it first through the communication channels of the Independence, his small exploration vessel that carried only 40 crew members into the unknown reaches of the galaxy. Jake sat in his captain's chair, a man in his mid-40s with dark hair graying at the temples and the kind of calm that comes from years of facing the unexpected in deep space. When his communications officer, Lisa Grant, turned to him with confusion written across her face. "Captain, we are receiving a transmission on an emergency frequency, but it is not addressed to us," Lisa said, her fingers moving quickly across her console, trying to decode the garbled message coming through the speakers. The crew of the Independence was small but skilled, composed of scientists, explorers, and engineers who had left Earth 3 years ago to study the outer regions of the galaxy that few human ships had ever ventured into before. Jake leaned forward in his chair, listening intently as Lisa worked to clarify the message, and soon the words became clearer, revealing a desperate call for military assistance from a place called Kepler Station, a research facility operated by the Valorian Alliance, one of the most advanced civilizations in known space. The message spoke of unknown hostile forces attacking the station, demanding immediate aid from their allies, the Corellians, a peaceful trading species known throughout the galaxy for their advanced technology and military capabilities. "It is not meant for us," Lisa repeated, her eyes meeting Jake's across the bridge of the small ship. "The Valorians would never call for human help. They consider us primitive Deathworlders." Jake knew this was true, as all humans did. The broader galactic community viewed Earth as a harsh and brutal world that produced tough but unsophisticated people. Nothing like the refined and advanced civilizations that had already mastered space travel, centuries before humanity even reached beyond their own. The crew watched and waited as Jake considered the decision before him, a choice that could define not only the fate of his ship and crew, but, perhaps, the reputation of all humanity among the stars. Lieutenant Amy Reeves, who served as Jake's second-in-command, stood near the captain's chair with her arms crossed, her athletic frame tense with the weight of the moment. She had trained her entire life for situations that mattered, situations that required courage and quick thinking. "Captain, if we respond, we risk our ship and our lives on a mission we were not asked to undertake," said Derek Fox, the chief engineer, a man in his 30s with steady hands and a logical mind. "We have no military capabilities. We are explorers, not warriors." Jake understood every concern his crew voiced, but as he looked at the faces of the people around him, he saw something that the galaxy had never truly understood about humans: an unwillingness to ignore those in need, a drive to protect and help even when the cost was high. "Calculate the fastest route to Kepler Station," Jake commanded, his voice steady and certain. "We are answering that distress call." The crew moved quickly into action, some expressing their doubts openly, while others simply accepted the captain's decision and focused on their tasks. Within minutes, the Independence was changing course, accelerating toward the coordinates where Kepler Station orbited a star system unknown to most of human civilization. Lisa continued to monitor the distress signal as they traveled, and she relayed information to the crew about what the Valorians were facing. The attackers were called the Zarthak, a militaristic species that had recently entered the sector with warships and advanced weaponry. They were attacking systematically, pushing deeper into the station with each assault as the Independence rushed through the darkness of space. Jake walked through the corridors of his ship, checking on his crew, speaking with them one by one, sharing the burden of the decision they had made together. In the medical bay, he found Dr. Kevin Park, a young physician who had volunteered for this deep space mission to explore and help wherever help was needed. The doctor was preparing his medical supplies, ensuring he would be ready for whatever casualties might come from their arrival at the station in the engineering section. Derek and his team were reviewing their ship systems, calculating how much weapons fire the Independents could withstand, and how they might use their limited resources in ways that advanced alien technology might not expect when Jake finally returned to the bridge. Lisa had managed to receive a clearer transmission from the Valorian commanders at Kepler Station. They were grateful but skeptical. They had expected their allies, not a small human exploration vessel with minimal combat capabilities, but they would accept help from anyone at this point. The Zarthak were relentless, and the station was running out of time. Jake stood before his crew on the bridge, his hand resting on the back of his chair, his eyes passing over each person who had chosen to follow him into danger. "We do not know what we will find when we arrive," he said, his voice carrying the weight of responsibility, but also something else. A kind of hope that humans could prove themselves in ways that the galaxy had never witnessed before. But we go forward because that is who we are. We do not turn away from those who need help. We do not stand aside when others are suffering. The crew nodded, understanding the truth in his words, understanding that they were about to write a new chapter in human history, one that might change how humanity was perceived among the stars forever. The Independence continued its journey toward Kepler Station, its engines pushing the small ship forward as fast as the physics of space travel would allow. And on the bridge, Jake Morrison watched the stars pass by, wondering what his crew would face when they arrived, wondering if a crew of simple explorers from a primitive world could make any difference at all against an enemy that seemed designed to be invincible. The approach to Kepler Station was filled with tension as the Independence began to slow down. Sensors detecting the massive Valorian installation that floated in the darkness of space like a geometric monument to alien engineering. Jake could see through the view screen that the station was under attack. Bright explosions bloomed across its hull as Zarthak gunships pounded away at its defenses. Smaller defensive turrets tried desperately to return fire, but the attackers seemed to have overwhelming numbers and firepower. The Independence moved carefully, trying not to draw attention to itself as they made their way to the station's docking bay. Jake kept his crew alert and ready for anything, knowing that their arrival would be unexpected and possibly unwelcome as they approached the docking coordinates. A voice came through the communication channel, speaking in the Valorian language that Lisa's translation system quickly converted to English. The voice belonged to Commander Marcus Chun, the leader of Kepler Station and a military officer of considerable rank and authority. "Unknown vessel. Identify yourself immediately. State your origin and your intentions." The commander's tone was clipped and professional. Showing no warmth or welcome, Jake himself responded, speaking clearly into the communication system. "This is Captain Jake Morrison of the human exploration vessel Independence. We received your distress signal and have come to offer assistance." There was a moment of silence on the channel, and when the commander spoke again, his tone had shifted to something closer to disbelief mixed with insulted pride. "Humans? You mean the primitive species from the Outer Rim? Why would you attempt to assist us in a military situation that is far beyond your capabilities?" Commander Chun's words were sharp and dismissive. Exactly what Jake had expected to hear, but there was no time for hurt feelings or lengthy explanations. The commander needed to prioritize survival over pride. Within minutes, the Independence was docked at the station, and Jake led a team of his best personnel to meet with the Valorian leadership commander. Chun stood in the central command hub of Kepler Station, a tall figure with crystalline skin that reflected the light of the displays around him. His forearms crossed in a gesture of clear frustration. "Your arrival is noted, but I do not see how a ship this small with such limited armament will change our situation," the commander said, his eyes scanning Jake and his crew with barely concealed skepticism. Jake kept his voice calm and respectful. He understood that pride was often a barrier. "Commander, we may have limited military assets, but we have engineers and problem solvers. We can work with your people to maximize what resources you have available." The commander was reluctant to accept help from what he clearly viewed as inferior beings. But the situation was growing more desperate by the hour. The Corellian reinforcements would not arrive for at least 2 weeks due to an asteroid field that blocked their jump routes. And the station could not hold out that long without additional support, so Commander Chen assigned the humans to support roles, having them assist with rescue missions, supply runs, and maintenance tasks on the station. It was clear he viewed them as expendable. He sent them to the most dangerous locations without hesitation, testing their usefulness and perhaps expecting them to prove useless or to be eliminated quickly. Derek Fox and his engineering team were sent to repair damaged power conduits in the outer sections of the station. These areas were frequently under Zarthak fire, and the Valorian engineers who had attempted the work previously had suffered casualties as the human team worked with focused intensity. Something remarkable began to happen when a section of Valorian technology proved too damaged to repair through conventional means. Derek did not give up as the Valorian specialists had. Instead, he studied the problem differently, using salvaged materials from destroyed equipment and repurposing them in ways that the advanced alien designers had never considered within hours. Derek and his team had created a functioning power system that far exceeded what anyone expected would be possible with the damaged components. The power flowed through sections of the station that had been dark, restoring light and life support systems that the Valorians believed were beyond recovery. Commander Chun himself came to witness the work, his crystalline features reflecting visible surprise at what the humans had accomplished. Meanwhile, Lisa Grant worked with the Valorian communication specialists to improve their damaged systems. She brought a different approach to the technical problems they faced, combining human intuition with their advanced technology in unexpected ways that increased their signal clarity and range significantly. Amy Reeves and her team were assigned to rescue operations in the most heavily damaged sections of the station. The Zarthak had taken lives and left many wounded, but the humans moved through these dangerous areas with a kind of determined calmness that impressed even the skeptical Valorian officers. They saved people who the Valorians believed were already lost. They treated the wounded with a compassion that transcended species and culture, and they did this repeatedly, pushing themselves past exhaustion because there were more people to help over the course of several days. The perception of the humans began to shift among the Valorian personnel at the station. They noticed that the humans did not panic when explosions rocked their work areas. They improvised solutions when standard procedures failed. They showed a kind of innovative thinking that seemed to come from a different way of understanding problems. One evening, as another Zarthak assault wave was being repelled, Derek was working on a critical defensive system that the Valorians had declared irreparable. He rigged together components using methods that made no sense according to Valorian engineering principles. Yet the result was a defensive network that protected an entire section of the station from enemy fire. Commander Chun appeared at the engineering station after the battle, his earlier contempt replaced by something that looked like acknowledgement. "Your crew has performed beyond my initial assessment, human captain. I begin to understand why your species has survived on your harsh world." Jake nodded respectfully but said nothing. He knew that actions spoke louder than words, and his crew was still writing the story of humanity's place among the stars with every task they completed, every life they saved, and every impossible problem they solved with determination and creativity. The crew of the Independence had not come to Kepler Station as conquerors or as equals yet, but they were beginning to prove something that the galaxy had never understood about Deathworlders. They were not primitive or inferior. They were simply different. And that difference might be exactly what was needed to turn the tide of the battle that was still being fought around them. The main reactor chamber deep beneath the heart of Kepler Station was where the most critical battle of all was about to unfold. A Zarthak strike during the third day of the assault had damaged the reactor's primary cooling system, and the temperatures were rising to dangerous levels with every passing hour. Commander Chun called Jake to the command center and explained the severity of the situation with an honesty that showed the commander had finally accepted the human captain as someone worthy of trust. The reactor will fail within 18 hours if we cannot repair the cooling system. Without the reactor, our life support fails, our shields fail, and our communications become silent. Jake listened carefully as the commander explained that the Valorian engineers had assessed the damage and declared it beyond repair. The cooling pipes were too damaged and the radiation levels were too high for prolonged exposure. No one could survive the work that would be needed. Jake turned to Derek Fox, who was standing beside him. The human engineer was already thinking through the problem, his mind working through the technical challenges in real time. "We can do it," Derek said with a calmness that seemed almost casual. "But we will need to work fast and accept some risk." Commander Chun looked at Jake with something close to desperation in his crystalline features. He had no other options left. "Do what you must, human. If you can save that reactor, you save the entire station." The plan came together quickly. Derek would lead a team of human engineers to the reactor chamber, accompanied by a single Valorian technician who understood the system from a theoretical standpoint. They would have to work in the highest radiation areas to repair the critical cooling pipes. Lisa Grant managed to clear a path through the Zarthak defensive lines using the station's internal systems and clever manipulation of the attacker's own detection equipment. Amy Reeves led a security team to protect the engineers as they moved through the station's corridors. Journey to the reactor chamber took longer than expected because the Zarthak had positioned forces throughout the station, trying to push deeper into its heart and capture or destroy the power source that kept the station functioning. When they reached the reactor chamber entrance, Amy made a quick decision that saved their lives. She saw 3 Zarthak warriors preparing to defend the entrance to the chamber, rather than attempting a direct firefight that they would certainly lose. She used the station's emergency systems to overload a nearby fuel line. Explosion created a wall of heat and fire between the humans and the aliens, forcing the Zarthak to retreat momentarily while Amy's team pushed through the smoke and chaos to reach the reactor chamber door. Derek and his team rushed inside. The chamber itself was a nightmare of heat and radiation. The damaged cooling system hung above them like a sword of Damocles, threatening to fall at any moment as the reactor core grew hotter and more unstable beneath it. Derek assessed the damage with quick, brutal honesty. The Valorian approach would have been to replace the entire cooling system with new components. But there were no new components available. They would have to rebuild what existed. The human team worked with hands and tools in the dangerous environment, wearing radiation suits that provided some protection but not complete safety. Derek made decision after decision, choosing paths through the repairs that seemed illogical but that he understood intuitively would work, where the Valorian engineers had tried to follow precise mathematical engineering principles. Derek and his humans adapted, improvised, and created solutions that merged old mechanical techniques with advanced technology. Hours passed in the reactor chamber, the heat pressing down on them, the radiation levels slowly climbing. Each team member knowing that this work was dangerous and that they might not leave the chamber alive. Derek's hands moved with purpose and precision as he welded connections that should not have worked according to any engineering manual, but that he knew in his bones would hold the pressure and the heat that was coming. The final piece clicked into place. The cooling system was no longer broken. It was no longer perfect, but it was functional. Derek activated the system and watched the temperature readings begin to drop on the monitoring equipment one by one. The humans stumbled out of the reactor chamber. Exhausted and battered by their exposure to the dangerous environment, Amy Reeves caught Derek as he emerged. His legs barely able to support him after hours of intense work. Commander Chun was waiting for them outside the chamber. And when the readings came back from the monitoring systems, confirming that the reactor was stabilizing and the cooling system was operational, the commander placed his hand on Derek's shoulder in a gesture that transcended species. "You have saved us all," the commander said, his voice carrying weight and genuine respect. "Your species possesses something we had dismissed. You possess the will to attempt what others call impossible." The reaction to the humans' success spread through the station like wildfire. Valorian personnel who had viewed them as primitive help began to treat them as essential members of the team. The humans were no longer being tested as expendable resources. They were now being seen as true allies, but the Zarthak were not finished. They had sensed weakness in the station's defenses during the time the humans were working on the reactor, and they were gathering their forces for what appeared to be a final all-out assault that would determine the fate of Kepler Station and everyone aboard it. The sensors detected the Zarthak fleet massing for the final assault. Over 200 warrior-class ships moving into position around Kepler Station, along with ground forces that numbered in the thousands. Waiting in attack pods for the moment they would be deployed, Commander Chun called an emergency meeting in the command center. Gathering Jake, his senior officers, and the leadership of the Valorian Defense Forces, the situation was grave, and everyone in the room understood the mathematics of what they were facing. "We cannot hold against this assault using conventional tactics," the commander stated flatly. "Our shields are damaged, our weapons are partially destroyed, and we lack the firepower to match their armada." Jake had been studying the patterns of Zarthak behavior throughout the assault, and he had noticed something that the Valorians, with their advanced technology, had overlooked in their focus on raw numbers and firepower. The Zarthak attacked with perfect coordination. Their movements synchronized and predictable. "They are controlled by a hive mind," Jake said, pulling up the data he had been collecting. "All their warriors, all their ships. They're all connected through neural links. They think as one organism. They move as one organism." The Valorian officers looked at this information with the understanding that while it explained the enemy's strength, it also meant that enemy forces could not be beaten through conventional military tactics. Jake turned to Derek Fox, who was standing against the wall with Amy Reeves beside him. "Derek, could you create electromagnetic pulse devices using our available resources?" Derek nodded slowly as he understood where the captain's mind was going. "Yes, we could build them, but they would need to be deployed across multiple locations simultaneously to have maximum effect." Jake outlined his plan to the assembled officers. It was risky and unconventional, using the Independence as a mobile distraction, while human teams would infiltrate the station's outer hull and plant electromagnetic pulse devices that would disrupt the Zarthak neural network and leave them disoriented and unable to coordinate. Commander Chun listened to the plan with obvious skepticism. "This strategy is based on technology that we do not fully understand and relies on human soldiers performing infiltration operations. Our forces were trained for direct conflict and fortified defense." "Exactly," Jake said calmly. "That is why this will work. The Zarthak are trained for direct conflict against conventional military forces. They have no experience fighting enemies who use deception and speed and unconventional tactics." The commander was silent for a long moment. Then he nodded. "We have no better option. We will attempt your strategy." "Captain Morrison." The preparations began immediately. Derek and his team worked furiously to construct the electromagnetic pulse devices using salvaged Valorian technology and human ingenuity. Each device was built to be compact enough for soldiers to carry, but powerful enough to disrupt the neural frequencies that connected the Zarthek forces. Amy assembled her best personnel for the infiltration teams, selecting soldiers who could move silently, think quickly, and adapt to unexpected situations. They were given special suits that would help them survive in the harsh environment of the stations. Exterior, the attack began with the Independents moving directly toward the Zarthak fleet, ignoring protocol and positioning, drawing their attention and their fire like a predator trying to attract a larger predator away from its prey. The human exploration vessel rocked under the barrage of alien weapons, hull sections exploding, systems overloading, but the Independents held course and held strong. Zarthak weapons continued to concentrate on the small ship while Jake and his crew on the bridge fought desperately to keep the vessel operational while the Zarthak attention was fixed on destroying the Independents. Amy's teams moved across the station's outer hull, using magnetic tools to climb across the armor plating, moving toward the locations where they would plant the pulse devices. The teams faced multiple Zarthak patrols, warriors in combat suits moving across the exterior of the station. But the humans used their environment in ways the Zarthak did not expect. Derek had suggested hiding spots, approach vectors, and timing windows that took advantage of human biology in ways that worked against the larger alien warriors. When the teams encountered enemy opposition, they did not attempt to fight using conventional firepower. Instead, they used the station's architecture and the alien technology that covered its surface, diverting power surges through exposed systems, using magnetic fields to confuse targeting systems, creating shadows and confusion. Jake personally led one of the infiltration teams after leaving command of the Independents to his second officer. He moved through the darkness of space with Amy and 4 other soldiers, planting devices as they went, his hands working with the precision of a man who had spent years maintaining delicate equipment in dangerous environments. The devices were simple in concept, complex electromagnetic pulse generators that would be triggered by a radio signal, each one placed carefully in locations where it would disrupt the maximum amount of neural link activity among the Zarthak forces. The Independents, now badly damaged but still functioning, led the Zarthak fleet on a chase across the station's outer perimeter, its engines pushed to the absolute limit as it maneuvered and evaded, buying time for the infiltration teams to complete their work. When the final device was planted, Jake triggered the radio signal and the cascade of electromagnetic pulses spread across the area, disrupting the Zarthak neural network in waves of interference that left the alien warriors confused and unable to coordinate their actions. The effect was immediate and dramatic. The Zarthak fleet began firing on each other in their confusion. Ground forces stopped advancing with clear purpose and began milling about in disarray. The hive mind that had made them such a formidable foe became a liability when it was disrupted, and confused Commander Chun led the Valorian counter-assault at that moment, his forces pushing through the gaps in Zarthak defenses. Using the window of opportunity that the humans had created, Jake and his teams made their way back to the station, fighting through confused but still dangerous Zarthak warriors. Amy's combat skills and the human team's ability to fight in small groups against larger numbers proved decisive. The battle turned. The Zarthak command center was neutralized by human forces using guerrilla tactics and sheer determination. The enemy fleet, leaderless and disorganized, began a tactical retreat as their neural network remained disrupted. The siege of Kepler Station was broken. The Zarthak threat had been defeated. And as the humans returned to the station, exhausted and damaged but alive, they knew that the galaxy would never view humanity in the same way again. The aftermath of the battle brought a silence to Kepler Station that felt almost surreal after days of constant assault and danger. The Zarthak fleet had retreated far beyond sensor range, and the station's defense systems were finally able to begin repairs and recovery operations. Casualty counts were assessed and shared. The humans had suffered injuries, but no deaths. A remarkable outcome considering the danger they had faced. The Valorian forces had sustained losses, but they were far fewer than they would have been without. The Human Intervention Commander Chen formally convened a ceremony in the station's main assembly hall, a vast chamber that normally hosted diplomatic meetings and cultural celebrations. Every station personnel who could stand was present. Along with all the humans from the Independence, Jake stood in dress uniform beside his crew. Amy Reeves, Derek Fox, Lisa Grant, and the others who had proven themselves through action and courage. The chamber was filled with representatives of various Valorian castes and military ranks. I summoned you here to acknowledge those who stood with us against impossible odds, Commander Chan announced, his voice carrying across the assembly. We harbored doubts about the humans from the Outer Rim. We viewed them as primitive and unsuited to the complexities of galactic civilization. We were profoundly mistaken. The commander presented commendations and honors to each human, but more importantly, he made a formal declaration that Kepler Station had been saved by human intervention and that humanity could no longer be dismissed as inferior or primitive. The Valorian High Council, the governing body of the Alliance, had received reports of the entire conflict. They studied the tactics that had been employed. They analyzed the innovations that the human engineers had created. And they began discussions about what all of this meant for humanity's place among the stars. 3 days after the battle, a message arrived from the Corellian reinforcement fleet that had been blocked from reaching the station during the siege. They expressed shock and dismay at learning that their mission was no longer necessary. They reviewed the records of what humans had accomplished, and they requested formal communication with human leadership. Lisa Grant found herself in the role of diplomat, working with the Valorians and the Corellians to establish formal protocols for trade and mutual defense between humanity and the greater galactic community. Her calm demeanor and intelligence made her perfect for the negotiations that would reshape humanity's future. Derek Fox spent hours with Valorian engineers, sharing techniques and approaches that seemed illogical to advanced civilizations, but that worked with elegant simplicity. The Valorian engineers gradually came to understand that their view of technology and engineering had been limited by their own assumptions about what was possible. Amy Reeves worked with Valorian military commanders to develop hybrid defense strategies that combined human tactical thinking with Valorian technological superiority. The military leaders quickly grasped that the human soldiers had something that advanced alien warriors sometimes lacked: the ability to adapt and improvise in real time. Jake Morrison spent his time helping to coordinate the reconstruction of Kepler Station's damaged sections, working alongside Valorian construction teams, human engineers, and specialist personnel from various other species who had begun to arrive as news of what happened spread throughout known space weeks, passed in this state of cooperative reconstruction and rebuilding. The station transformed into a place of cooperation and mutual respect, where species that had previously existed in their own hierarchical structures began to interact as genuine equals. One evening, Jake stood on an observation deck, looking out at the stars beyond the station, thinking about Earth, and wondering how humanity would respond when they learned that one small crew of explorers had fundamentally changed how humans were perceived among the galactic community. Commander Chun joined him at the viewport, the Valorian leader carrying an ornate case that he held out to Jake. This is a commendation medal of the Valorian Alliance, the highest honor that can be bestowed on a non-Valorian individual, Commander Chun explained as Jake accepted the case and opened it to reveal a crystalline pendant that seemed to capture and hold light in a beautiful and intricate way. Your species has taught us something valuable that we had forgotten. Captain Morrison. Strength is not measured by what you have accumulated or what technology you command. Strength is measured by what you will endure and what you will sacrifice to protect others. Jake held the medal and felt the weight of it. Not just physical weight, but the symbolic weight of everything it represented. The shift in perception. The acknowledgement that humans were not lesser beings, but different beings with unique strengths. On behalf of humanity, I accept this honor, Commander, but what we have done here was driven by something simple. We cannot turn away from those who suffer, and we cannot believe that the cost is too high when lives are at stake, Jake said, understanding in that moment that he was speaking not just as a captain, but as a representative of his entire species. The Corellian fleet commander arrived in person to meet Jake, bringing with them trade proposals, defense agreements, and an official request from the Corellian Council to establish diplomatic relations with humanity. The Corellian species, known for their mathematical precision and peaceful nature, recognized in humanity something they valued: the willingness to take risks to achieve peace and stability. Lisa returned from her negotiations with news that would reshape humanity's future. A formal alliance had been proposed between humanity and the Valorian Alliance, with both species agreeing to provide mutual defense and technological support. It was far more than any diplomat could have hoped to achieve as the Independents prepared to depart Kepler Station. After nearly 3 weeks of fighting, rebuilding, and establishing new relationships, the crew gathered one final time on the observation deck that Jake had come to know well. Humans had arrived at Kepler Station, unknown and unwanted. They had been dismissed as primitives by a galactic community that had viewed Deathworlders as inferior. They were leaving as recognized allies, whose actions had saved an entire civilization and changed the course of human history. Jake looked out at the station one final time, watching as the Valorian Defense Forces fired a traditional salute, a celebration of victory and alliance that reverberated through the darkness of space. He thought about Earth and the wonder that would greet them when they returned home with news that humanity had finally taken its rightful place among the stars, not as primitives, but as Deathworlders worth respecting.